You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which invites you along on a journey to learn of mindful living, grow in mental health, and inspire through personal growth. In a world where we can often feel much stress and overwhelmed, this podcast provides bite-sized tips and real talk conversations, empowering you to embrace mindfulness and nurture your full potential. I'm your host, Vanessa De Jesus Guzman, educator, licensed professional counselor, entrepreneur, and mom. I'm passionate about helping others live life with peace of mind and ease of heart without losing their, here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 198 of the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So for the entire month of May, we have been celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month by having therapists on the podcast delve into their different areas of expertise and really interviewing mental health professionals and how they came to be and their areas of expertise and certifications. I am so grateful to our guests who have joined us thus far. And to cap off the Mental Health Awareness Month series, I am not interviewing myself, but I will be sharing a little bit about my specific expertise of working with kids and with moms. I realize that throughout the course of this podcast, I do try to integrate the concept of how things apply to kids as much as possible. And it's not only because it's my passion, but it's also because a lot of you are either parents or educators. And if you're not, that's okay too. But these are all great things for everybody to learn about because before we were all adults, we were all kids. And I'm sure we have kids in our lives to some capacity. So it's really good to know some background knowledge as to how we can help these special little people in our lives. Now, even though I say I work with kids and with moms, and those are two very general, broad terms, I specialize in working with children from 8 years old to college age kids or young adults. And I specialize in working with moms with parenting related stress. A lot of my specialization comes in with working with kids on the spectrum or with anxiety, with depression, with school related stress. Sometimes that includes behavioral issues. Sometimes that includes bullying or life transitions, divorce, separation, identity in terms of LGBTQIA issues, or in terms of racial identity. And then with moms, it's really helping them how to not lose it on their kids and how to balance a life of specifically being working moms for the most part and how to be present for their kids. And what guides me is really mindful living, which is why my practice is called Free to Be Mindful, all done very intentionally. But for today, we're going to just focus on how mental health in kids is really seen differently from mental health in adults. So some people think it's all the same, and really, it's very different to work with a 65-year-old person than with a 30-year-old person than with a 5-year-old person. And these are for many different reasons. First and foremost, kids' developmental stages are very different than adults because kids' brains and emotional regulation systems are still developing, and this impacts how they experience and how they express their emotions. So when we look at symptoms in adults, first, adults for the most part can generally say what's happening, but in kids, they don't always have the language, even the most verbal of kids, they don't always have the language to express how it is that they're feeling. So we see a lot of their emotions come out through their behavior. And sometimes instead of sadness, we will see increased irritability, or instead of anxiety, we will see defiance or withdrawal. So symptoms present very differently. In addition to that, because kids are growing, because kids are learning and they're impacted by their external stimuli, their mental health can often be influenced by family dynamics, by their school environment, and by peer relationships. And this is something where we as adults impact our kids' mental health more than we realize. We impact them through our words. We impact them through what we say, through what we don't say, and with our actions, especially when it comes to family dynamics, what our families are going through and how we manage and navigate our family dynamics and challenges. All of that our kids pick up. And you'd be really surprised of the things that I hear within this therapy room because typically kids know a lot more than the adults in their lives think they know. And even when they may not understand everything that's happening, they pick up on the nuances that adults typically don't think they do. Diagnosing mental health issues in kids can also be a little bit more challenging because there are also overlapping developmental factors that can be taking place at the same time. In addition to that, they're really still learning how to regulate their emotions. That means how to kind of navigate these big feelings that they're feeling. And again, because it has to do typically within school systems or within family systems, it's often not just treating the child on his or her own, but also seeing what can be done in school, what can be done after school, and most especially, what can be done at home. Fortunately, though, kids aren't super duper aware, the young ones, of the stigma that mental health can sometimes carry, even though it's getting better. I know that it's still present. So when the littles come, it's just playing games and having fun, although we're learning a lot of strategies, a lot about oneself, and a lot about how to manage our big feelings and big emotions and socialize with others, or how to help ourselves through the mental health challenges that we have, whatever the situation calls for. But as kids get older, then sometimes it does get a little challenging as far as explaining that there's nothing wrong with seeing a therapist. And throughout the course of treatment, they see that. And when they end or graduate from services, then they typically have a different outlook on mental health. So I know I was put on this earth to help kids, but there are plus and minuses to it because with adults, we may just be working with the adult and that can make a lot of impact. But with kids, we're really relying heavily on parents, on caregivers, and on teachers for support and intervention to help out with what's happening in the therapeutic room once a week. Also, we have to understand that kids' mental health are highly influenced by their immediate environment, again, which includes family, school, social settings, and whatever activities that they're involved in. And the big thing that really sticks with me is how important it is to get kids help early on, whether it is with developmental issues, with mental health issues, with behavioral concerns, because they're growing and this is a foundation to their lives. And if we don't do this quickly and effectively within a certain window, then we make it much harder and much more challenging for them as they get older because issues may become ingrained in their personality, and it's hard to sometimes shift out of those things. So it's awesome because we can make quick change, but if we don't catch it early, sometimes it's harder to make that change. So, I would like to share some tips for parents to keep in mind when they think about their kids going to see a therapist. It's always better to do it earlier on than later on so we can catch things earlier and help them learn and implement strategies into their lives. If you're a parent or caregiver or educator, you may be thinking then, well, what is it that I have to notice in order to take my child to get this outside help? I always say that you want to understand your child's baseline, their normal everyday level of functioning. And when you see things start to shift, whether it be in their behavior, in their grades, in how they interact with others, then that may be a good time to start looking. You may always want to start with your child's school counselor. And yes, it's school counselor and not guidance counselor. These are trained professionals. The education has definitely changed and it's very mental health based when you're earning your school counseling degree. And although they cannot provide therapy within the school realm, they can help as much as it impacts academics, and they can guide you and let you know as a parent or caregiver when would be a good time to seek outside supports. As far as what you can do at home to help your child, it really starts with spending intentional time with them. That means just having conversation, but really listening more than we speak. Sometimes we tend to overdo it as adults, and our kids have a lot of things to say. And if they get the sense that we care for what they have to say, and even for their opinion, even if they're wrong sometimes, we still want to hear where they're coming from. We want to understand how they look at the world, the perspectives they have, the friendships they have, because that's all going to help us better understand our kids. And yes, we can offer support, but as our kids get older, we may even ask them, do you just want me to listen, or do you want me to provide you with some guidance? And even asking that question allows your child to build more trust in you, so that sometimes you're just listening, and that's really hard when you have things to say. And then sometimes they know they can depend on you for that guidance that you're there ready to give. Other strategies that also help is really understanding yourself. And this is why I love working with moms, really understanding yourself and how you show up as a parent, because our kids are sponges, even from the infant stage, and they learn to respond to things as we respond to things. So if your kid goes from 0 to 100 and they flip out really easily, there may be something there, but also, are they seeing it from someone in the house or outside of the house and then mimicking those types of behaviors? So, you really want to think about how you're taking care of yourself and your mental health, and then do things together that can help both of you. And really talk things out as far as, I need a break right now and I'm going to go to my room because I need to rethink what just happened. Or I can't talk about the situation because I need some time to cool off before I can have a level and civil conversation. Whatever it is, if you tell that to your child first, that'll be more impactful than just going off the cuff and yelling and then not knowing what you're saying if you're reacting instead of responding. And then it also teaches your child how to do the same when they also have to control or regulate their emotions. So, talking about how you take care of yourself, doing different activities like leaning into journaling or leaning into the arts or music or even sports or exercise if that's your thing. Explaining to kids to take the time to do the things that bring them joy. Limiting screen time, though, because yes, that does bring them joy. However, they don't need to be in front of a screen for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time, even on a weekend. So we want to make sure that when we introduce new things, I'm thinking when we introduce the Nintendo Switch in my home, you have to start at a certain level, because if you give them free reign, it's harder to get that back. It's also super important to not only have healthy outlets at home, so physical outlets, mental and emotional outlets, and yes, sometimes screen outlets. But my friends, we have to get outside. And I know it's hard, especially in the Northeast or in the North where it gets cold and we have more cold days, perhaps in warmer days, but we have to get our kids outside. I feel like the lack of social skills is really making a big impact, not only into the way that our kids are learning, but the way our kids are interacting with one another or lack thereof, and how that's going to then impact the workforce in 10, 20, 30 years from now. And don't just send them outside to play, but please go outside and play with them. Or even if you're indoors, take a moment and play with them. And it doesn't mean you need to love playing with dolls. It doesn't mean that you need to love doing a specific board games. Sometimes just watching them play and spending time with them and asking them questions goes a long way. Or having them teach you something new. That also goes a long way to help the relationship. So these tips are very generic and are very broad because each child is completely different, each family is completely different, and each developmental stage is completely different. What worked in one stage may not work in another, and sometimes what works in one day may not work another day. So it is a trial and error. It is a lot of effort on the parent's behalf, but please know that what you pour into your child, especially when they're younger, is going to make those later, especially that middle school age, those years, is going to make that much more manageable, so that when your child is then in later high school age, you have a really good relationship. They know that they can turn to you, and hopefully they know that turning to a mental health therapist or specialist can be something that can greatly benefit them. Just as we take care of our physical health, we should also be taking care of our mental health as well. And when you seek the help of a mental health therapist, know that it looks completely different as well. We don't just talk to each other for 50 minutes because that can get quite boring to a kid. So, in my therapy room, when I'm working with young children, and sometimes even with teens too, there are balls being thrown around. There are a lot of Uno, Jenga, Connect Four, a lot of card games, but we're not just playing games to play games. It all has a therapeutic goal at the end. I also love using literature in treatments because sometimes they can't see things for within themselves, but they can see things in characters of books. We use a lot of puppets and role playing depending on the age. And I love using sand trays as well, which can also be used with adults because it makes a really big difference for kids who sometimes aren't able to put things into words, but can create things via sand tray or even via artwork. So it doesn't always look like therapy, but at the end, when we see children progress, when we see our kids starting to feel better, the biggest thing is not only learning the strategies, but implementing the strategies and need less services. It is such a pleasure to see. I always start off with telling, especially the preteen and teenagers, that my goal is for them to fire me, meaning that they no longer need me in their lives because they've learned what they've had to learn for this stage in their lives. And they always crack up and they say, I can't wait to fire you. However, when it comes to graduation of services, and I like to use graduation with clients instead of termination with patients because we're not sick, we're just getting help. When it comes to graduation, it can be very sentimental. Recently, I have closed a couple of cases as I'm getting ready to go on a maternity leave in this stage of life where I am now. And it can be really hard because we form really special relationships. Think about those special teachers, perhaps, that you've had in your life, especially in your early years, who've made a really big impact. It's kind of like that because even though I don't see kids on a daily basis, the same child every single day, when they are here once a week, sometimes twice a week, depending on what's going on, they are sharing their innermost parts of themselves. So it is a lot when it comes to graduation of services, but it feels fantastic when a family can see that difference and when the child can see the difference for themselves and they're just a better version of the person who first walked through the door. So I hope that you can tell I absolutely love what I do. I never picture myself working with a geriatric population because I don't have that experience. I don't think I'd be good at it. I have been asked, why don't I work with a certain age level or why don't I work with certain genders or certain topics? And I like to phrase it to you like this. Would you go to a podiatrist if you think that you have cancer? Would you go to a gastro specialist if you think there's something wrong with your heart? Would you go to a cardiologist if you think that there's something wrong with your knees? We all have different areas of specialization. And yes, although we all are mental health therapists, our areas of certifications are really meant to help us become the specialists that we are with the area and the population that we can do our most effective work. So, again, I love what I do, and I love to continue serving the population that I do within the state of New Jersey. I can't wait for you to tune in for next week's episode as we celebrate Free to Be Mindful's fifth birthday. And on that episode, I'll share all of the other ways that I work with not only with children, but with mothers and with families, and even with businesses, and how I like to reach the impact past the therapeutic room. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And for today's guided meditation, I just ask that you take a moment to reflect on a special, perhaps therapist, or if not even a special teacher or educator that made a difference in your life. What was it about them that helped you connect? What was it about them that perhaps made you feel loved or appreciated or cared for or special? How did that feel for you as a child? Regardless what age you had this educator or special person in your life. And how did this feeling help you in terms of maybe your confidence or the way that you expressed yourself, the belief you had in yourself, and how you carried yourself even after that experience or that grade? We all have someone special, a teacher, an educator, a coach, a mentor that can really create major impact in our lives. And as my personal motto goes of learn, grow, and inspire, once we learn more about ourselves with this impact from these special people and we grow as people, I strongly feel that then we have the responsibility to inspire others to either do the same or inspire other young people in their time of need. I hope that regardless of what age you are now or where you are in your life, that you are able to take a step back, to take a beat, to cool down when you need to, and to be kind to the special little or maybe not so little people in your life. Know that the way that you show up and the way that you choose to respond to people in your everyday life, whether it be people you care for, whether it be the kids in your life, or whether it be that person on the side of the road, a simple random act of kindness, a smile, or a listening ear goes a long way. Thank you, my friends, so much for tuning in today and every week. And remember that in a world where we are free to be anything that we want to be, we are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.